The AFL drop punt kick is performed predominantly in the sagittal plane and is accomplished through knee and hip flexion and extension. The movement can be split into 4 distinct phases. Phase 1, the approach, consisting of the lead-up movements. The ball moves with the hands and should be carried over the thigh of the kicking leg. Phase 2, the release. Immediately prior to release, the ball is brought to waist height. The hip muscles extend and accelerate the thigh before the knee and ankle swing through. Phase 3, the contact where the foot meets the ball, occurring at 0.1 to 0.3 meters from the ground. Phase 4, the follow through where the feet continue moving for a couple of steps towards the target. In this video, I will be talking about the kinematic and kinetics of Phase 2 and 3 of the AFL drop punt. In the leg wind-up stage of Phase 2, when the supporting leg heel is in contact with the ground, the kicking leg knee angles approximately 28.3 degrees, and in the forward swing phase before ball contact, the knee angles approximately 62 degrees. In Phase 3, at ball contact, the hip angles 120 degrees and the knee angles around 60 degrees. During the leg wind-up and forward swing phase, foot speed is 22.4 meters per second and foot speed at ball contact is 26.4 meters per second. Before ball contact, the shank angular velocity is 1,535 degrees per second, knee angular velocity is 1,326 degrees per second, and hip angular velocity is 522 degrees per second. At ball contact, shank angular velocity is 1,548 degrees per second, knee angular velocity is 1,355 degrees per second, and hip angular velocity is 56 degrees per second. In the release phase, the quadricep muscle group, rectus femoris, vastus medialis, intermedius, and lateralis eccentrically contract, whilst the hamstrings, semitendinosus, bicep femoris, and semimembranosus, as well as the hip flexors, pectineus, adductors, and brachialis contract concentrically. Whereas at initial ball contact, the quadriceps concentrically contract simultaneously, the hamstrings contract eccentrically. During both phases, the rectus abdominis isometrically contract. Muscle activation during Phase 2 in the hamstrings is 13%, quadriceps 34%, and rectus abdominis 24%. However, in Phase 3, muscle activation in the hamstring is 22%, quadriceps 19%, and rectus abdominis 23%. The vertical ground reaction force of the kicking leg prior to ball contact is approximately 2,416 newtons. The lateral ground reaction force is 262 newtons, and the medial ground reaction force is 107 newtons. Now I will talk about the kinetic and kinematic variables in an AFL drop punt kick that will decrease injury risk and increase performance. Muscle action and activation are important kinetic variable within the drop punt motion. Excessive volumes of kicking reduce eccentric knee flexor strength and hamstring muscle activation in maximal eccentric movements. Lower levels of eccentric strength are associated with increased risk of hamstring injuries, and low levels of muscle activation are associated with a greater risk for isolated muscles to tear when they are forcefully lengthened. Eccentric strength loss after kicking is correlated with a contraction mode-specific decline in skeletal muscle electromyography within the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. By improving eccentric knee flexor strength through strength training of the quadricep muscle groups reduces hamstring muscle activation, therefore lowers the risk of hamstring injuries as a result of reduced strain on the muscles. Foot speed and angular velocity are critical kinematic variables in the drop punt. Foot speed and angular velocity contribute collectively to kicking distance. By increasing foot speed by 0.51 to 0.81 meters per second enables kicking distance to reach approximately 60 meters. Training the kicking leg to use greater amounts of hip and shank angular velocities at ball contact can also lead to greater distances, as shank angular velocity accounts for 11% of foot speed and hip angular velocity accounting for 40% of foot speed. This can be done through skill and conditioning drills that promote greater foot speed and shank angular velocity, such as kicking for maximal distance. Increasing foot speed can be achieved by increasing approach speed so the hip of the kick leg is moving faster towards the target during the last step, as a result increasing performance in relation to kicking distance.